It's JVceo and welcome to my YouTube channel. If you're tuning into the channel for the first time, please hit the subscribe button, drop your comments and do like the video. I put up a new video every Sunday at 6 p.m. and the topic would range usually from finance to properties to personal development and so on and so forth. I know you're thinking, right, you've looked at the title of this video and you're thinking, JV, retire at 30. Bearing in mind I'm 27 at the moment, and you're thinking, he's not going to retire at 30 for one of two reasons. Firstly, because you think, oh, he can't do it. Or, second reason, probably, I'd hope the more of you are in the second reason, oh, he's a workaholic. He loves to work. He's not retiring anytime soon. You are right. The first people are not right. I definitely can do it. But yeah, I am not looking to retire early, but I've seen a lot of things online about this and I thought I'd do a video on it. Because I have an interesting spin on it or an interesting take on it, and that's why I thought I'd do a video on this. So I am not looking to retire, but I am looking to put myself in a position where I can retire. So what I'll do is I'll take you through, I think, 4 or 5 different points in terms of my plans to retire. But before we do that, let me tell you about the background, how people plan it, and what the general rule of thumb is. So we'll talk about the 4% rule, and we'll also talk about the FIRE sort of thesis on retiring early. So what's the FIRE movement? FIRE movement essentially stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early, and it gained traction in like, I'd probably say 2010, with a lot of the new millennials, you know, looking to actually retire early and not want to work into their 50s, their 60s and so on and so forth. And honestly, people have done phenomenal with it, but at the same time, I just don't feel like it's one rule fits all. Don't get me wrong, I think you could stand on the shoulders of giant and you could take learnings from that, but I think you have to tweak it to your own specific sort of situation. Generally speaking, the FIRE rule talks about the 4% rule, right? Well, the FIRE movement talks about the 4% rule. What's the 4% rule? The 4% rule, essentially speaking, is you put yourself in a position where you invest enough to be able to take 4% of your actual investments every year, and that would keep you going. That's literally the pay that you give to yourself. And so how do you actually get to that number in the first place? The 4% rule, essentially speaking, to work it out, you take your expenditure. Let's say you spend £20,000 a year. So £20,000 a year is your expenditure. You times it by 30, which would give you £600,000, and then you divide and then you get the 4% of that. So if, essentially speaking, if you take that £20,000 that you spend every single year and you're able to accumulate it into 600,000 and invest that 600,000, getting 4% of 600,000 every single year gives you 24,000. So you should be okay to retire. That's the whole idea of it. Well, I'm going to tackle it from a different point. Right, so point number 1, because obviously not everyone can literally just save up 600,000 and invest it. So point number 1 for me is to be extremely frugal. So if you actually study my lifestyle, I don't live a flashy lifestyle. I enjoy things and, you know, I enjoy the moment, and I do have, you know, purchases that are quite on the high side, perhaps the watches and so on and so forth. But generally speaking, I stay away from what the typical sort of youth or 27-year-old would probably do, whether that is spending a lot of money on clothes and so on and so forth. So my whole idea in terms of being frugal is the more frugal I am, that's the more money I can put into what I'll talk about in point number 2. An example being, if I can cut my expenditure from £2,000 to £1,000 a month, that extra £1,000 that I'm saving, essentially speaking, would give me around £400 a month for the rest of my life, essentially speaking, in retirement, which I'd explain later on. And in terms of being frugal, I've always practiced this particular thing. I save around 90% of my income. And people think, if you save 90% of your income, how are you meant to live? Rule number 1, or well, approach number 1 is to make enough money so that spending 10% it's actually a decent amount of money, if that makes any sense. An example, you know, if you're only making £1,000 a month, spending 10%, it's only £100, is very difficult to do. But now if you're making, say, £10,000 a month, 10% is £1,000. You possibly can live on that, depending on what part of the country you live in. The second approach is, I learned that from actual Rich Dad Poor Dad. To be fair, I had that in practice already, but I think Rich Dad Poor Dad sharpened my knowledge of it. That means basically paying yourself first and then figuring it out later. Why would you work so hard only to pay all this money to all these creditors and all these companies that you obviously it's your monthly bill, but you're the person that put the work in. Pay yourself first and then figure it out later. And I used to do that and it works so well, because you'd be shocked how creative you can get once your back is against the wall. You know, that's when the new business idea starts coming up and little side hustles start coming up. So always do that. So that's my point number one. Right, the second point involves properties. If you know me, you know I love properties. I always say to my friends that properties is the surest way of becoming a millionaire, and equally properties is the surest way of retiring early. So my plan is to invest in at least 20 undervalued low-end properties for around that £80,000 mark. Doing my numbers on this, my profit, bearing in mind I'd select to be on a repayment mortgage rather than an interest-only mortgage. So my profit on this would be somewhere in the region of £300 a month. That's putting down, let's say, a 20% deposit of 80,000. So with a mortgage of around £60,000. So my profit will be around £300 a month. Times by 20 properties is £6,000 a month. In addition to that, I will be earning the increased equity in the property. Obviously, I'm not going to have that in cash, but it's still my net worth building up, and it's something that I can tap into in terms of taking loans against the house and so on and so forth. But if I wanted to, my increased equity would amount to around £4,000 every single month. How do I get to that number? So let's say £80,000 house. Let's say I've put down 20%, which is actually 25%, which is like £20,000 if I'm correct. So £20,000 deduct from 80,000 gives you 60,000. 60,000 divided by 25 years, which would be the average term of that mortgage. So 60 over 25 years will give you £2,400 every single year. That's how much is being paid off every single year. Divide that by 12 and that would give you £200. So every month that your tenants in the property pay their rent and you service the debt, you've literally earned £200 in terms of equity. Now times that by 20 properties, which is obviously the target, times 20 properties, that will give you £4,000. So that means now with my property portfolio, I should be earning around £10,000 a month in terms of in terms of income from that, and I'm sure I can definitely retire on £10,000 a month. So that's my idea to it, right? If you agree with me, just put it in the comment section. If you're enjoying the video so far, make sure you like and subscribe and share it around as well, because I think this video will probably be very helpful, and then people could tackle it in their own individual ways. Some of you are thinking, hold on, how are you going to buy 20 properties? By the way, let's assume that I do not have no properties right now. That's my whole idea to this video. Let's assume I don't have nothing and I'm starting afresh, because I don't want to have an edge over the average person watching this video. I know some of you are probably, you know, just starting from the ground up. So let's assume we're all starting from the ground up. Forget anything else that I already have, right? I think it's very doable. And for those of you wondering, how am I going to finance this property? I think firstly, by being creative in the way that I structure some of my property deals. Secondly, through things like, you know, getting properties at below the market value, driving a hard bargain and being able to finance or refinance at a later stage, pulling your money out and recycling that money over and over and over. An example being that initial 20 grand, I might recycle it over 5 properties, and then another 20 grand over another 5 properties, and then another 20 grand over another 5 properties. So technically speaking, I probably only need 80 grand to be able to get that done, you know. So that's my idea to it. Find properties, let's say find, you know, properties that could be valued after repair value at 100, 110 grand. Get it at maybe that 70 grand mark, maybe that 80 grand mark. Be able to put in some work into it, turn it around, refinance it, pull out your money, go do it somewhere else. So that's the idea to that, which leads me on to point number 3. So point number 3, you probably guessed it, investing in land in Nigeria. Scoping out areas with a massive upside potential and investing in those areas. In terms of my land strategy, right, you all know land doesn't really give you any cash flow compared to properties, right? But what the land does it gives me foundation, it gives me an emergency fund pot, if you want to call it that. So that's what I'm looking to use, or what I'll be looking to use the land for, you know, literally invest in those. So let's say I wanted to make a big purchase for my child. I don't have none now, but assuming I do in future, I can, let's say, sell a property and be able to do that, if that makes any sense. That's if I don't want to dip into the cash flow for any reason. Or let's say, you know, there's a big family holiday. Again, I could use that for that, essentially speaking. So to be more specific, my plan would be to make 4 purchases every single year, 4 purchases of around £5,000, which equates to, I think, around 2.5 million naira. So spending around 10 million naira every single year buying land in Nigeria. And when I talk about upside potential, right, albeit that everything goes well, potentially that £5,000, you know, could end up being worth a significant amount of money. And so yeah, that's my plan with regards to, you know, being able to retire early. And like I said, you know, for me, that would just literally be an emergency fund. So, oh, there's something going on. All right, I need 30-40 grand in cash quickly. I'll go sell 1 land, which have probably appreciated to that value at that point, use that money and do what I need to do. So that's that, which would then lead me onto my 4th and my final point. No, it's not shares. Some of you are probably thinking, when is he going to talk about stocks and shares? I don't know enough about stocks and shares to give you great advice on that. But my 4th plan would probably be to figure out a business that I can run without actually presently running the business, or without actually actively being involved in the day-to-day operations of the business. An example being perhaps like a subscription-based business where, you know, everything is already pre-set up and I can literally just be a shareholder, have someone else as a director who makes all the necessary decisions, and then I literally sit back and, you know, get dividends paid out to me. Or even if it's not a business as such, that, you know, that I could take a back seat in, it could be the businesses that I run at the moment. Maybe grow them to a position where I can literally step away from it and have someone else as a director, pay them a salary, have them make all the important decisions, have them be the driving force behind the business, and I could sit behind as a shareholder and take dividends. Again, that is me quote unquote retiring early. Again, they could consult me unofficially, but again, in terms of taking an active part in the business, I wouldn't have none of that. So that's my 4-step sort of plan to retire early. I don't think there's a right or wrong approach. I think it's down to your number. I think it's all down to your individual number. So for me, I've always said, you know, it's 10 grand a month. I live a comfortable life with 10 grand a month, and, you know, retiring with 10 grand a month would ensure that I live a comfortable life for the rest of my life, if that makes any sense. So that's that. But bear in mind, I'm not saying that I'm going to spend £10,000 on my expenses, but now that gives me an avenue to keep investing even in retirement. It gives me an avenue to go on holidays. It gives me an avenue to be able to have kids and live comfortably. Because for me, what's the point of retiring with 20 grand a year, or retiring with 24 grand a year? That's not really the sort of retirement that I would want to go into. That's why I've tackled mine from a totally different standpoint. But with that being said, I hope you enjoyed the video. I think this is a topic that you need to actually talk to yourself about and you need to explore. It's so important because I don't think enough people think that far ahead. And most people are just comfortable working a regular retail job. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with it, but even whilst you're in that retail job, you should always analyze your space and see how far that retail job is going to get you and how you could potentially expedite the process. And so that's that, man. If you have any suggestions or in terms of what I should include in my retirement plan, please put it down in the comment section below. Thank you for watching. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you share the video. Make sure you like, and I'll see you next Sunday at 6 p.m.